I am so excited to bring to you this four-part series on trauma presented by ICOI. And our presenter today is Jocelyn Vega. And Jocelyn, I'm going to hand the floor over to you.
Thank you so much, Amy, Brittany, and the whole team. It is such a blessing to be here today with each and every one of you. As Amy said, my name is Jocelyn Vega. I am director of the Trauma Initiatives team. And it is, again, such a blessing to be in conversation with you because that's what today is truly about, right? Learning, sharing, conversing with one another because trauma isolates us, can separate us. But when we gather, when we create circles, when we're willing to engage with one another, witness each other, we can truly engage in some healing work and really identify and gather what has been traumatic. So that's a little bit about my intention for today's training on the impact of trauma, a little bit about my own background, so you know where I'm coming from with this trauma work. Before being at ICOI, where I'm a director, as I mentioned, I worked at the Cook County courthouses. So whether it was family law, immigration law, mostly I was in the protective services. So whether that was, working in orders of protection, working in domestic violence courthouse, you name it. And I did everything in between, working with families, children, youth, you name it. And before that time, I was blessed to be welcomed back to Cambodia to work with war survivors, Khmer Rouge veterans. So individuals who are part of the Khmer Rouge. If you're not familiar, super happy to send you a follow-up email on the history behind that. I worked at a museum that really worked to capture the gender trauma during that time. So experiences that women had during that point of genocide. I worked at a library too in Cambodia, and I worked with community members at a children's library. I worked at a research center. And my experiences before that was at Cornell Law School, working with undocumented farm workers and farm owners in the United States. I also worked with farm workers who were internationally trafficked. And, the story and history goes on and on. A lot of trauma, a lot of work, but a lot of community, commitment, strength, humanity within this work. And that's why I show up so energetic, because of all the people I was able to connect with in those roles. And that's why I say this conversation is such a blessing, because healing is possible, people. Supporting individuals is within our role and within our capacity. No matter how small you think your role is or your service is in the larger issues, all of you are making a difference. All of you can have an impact. And that's the goal of today's training. Learning about trauma, but also reinforcing ourselves in this work. So really, really excited. We have, here friends who are dropping in, asking some questions. So yes, I can follow up and give Amy some resources on, the genocide in Cambodia. I'll do that when I send over the slides. And yeah, just making sure I answer that. So thank you for that. So with that, let's take a moment to care for ourselves whenever we do any type of trauma work or work in general. We got to make sure we're replenishing ourselves. At the end of the day, we are only human, right? We only have one body, one mind, one heart, so much that you can do. However, in this training, it's very important that you breathe, that you stretch, that you stay engaged in your body. In my own lifetime, I have gone to talks like this. I have gone to, it was a domestic violence training. And this was like a long time ago. It had to be over 8 years, 9 years ago. And it was the first time where I heard certain language, certain things started clicking, experiences started flooding in, and I was kind of pushed back and kind of seeing all these things come together or learning so much new information. So I've been in your shoes, and that's why I'm telling us we need to take care of ourselves during this training. You are the biggest priority during these 2 hours today. You're my boss these 2 hours, and I want to make sure I deliver and that you feel safe and confident. So it's important for you to engage with your senses, to relax, to breathe, to be with yourself. Make sure that you are engaging with your own thoughts and minds. This is not a race. There's a lot of information. but you are not at a race, people. You're here to learn. You're here to put things down, take what you want, and you can come back to the rest. This is being recorded. You have the slides. This is not a race, okay? Even though there's a lot to learn, not a race. And as we get ready to dive into the material now, I want you to put in the chat or in your journal or in your heart, how are you going to debrief after today's training? Are you going to go on a walk? It's kind of beautiful out here in Illinois. Not the sunniest, but hey, we got to take it. Are you going to eat lunch? Are you going to walk your dog, hug someone, you name it. So give yourself this moment, people, to be intentional of what are you doing to debrief after today's training? So Michelle, our friend, is going to walk their dog. Wonderful. What kind of dog do you have, Michelle? I love dogs. So I'm wondering what you have.
I have a miniature schnauzer.
Beautiful. Oh, nice. You got a lot of smiles in the other Zooms. A lot of people love that. All right. We have people having hugs, dinner with friends, dog playing with dogs and son. Dogs are just really popular. Okay, I'm seeing this. Wonderful. You teach HIT classes, Christmas stuff. Wonderful. And this is a quick tip, everyone. This is definitely, to get us warmed up, but we have to be intentional about how we care about ourselves. We can't care for ourselves when we're already hitting the wall, when we feel dragged, when we feel like we're on the floor. Don't get me wrong. Take care of yourself. Do what you got to do. But you have to set up some intentionality. You have to look out for your future self. You got to see and value what you put in and what you're giving to others, and pause to ask yourself, what am I doing for myself to keep this up or to keep doing this, right? Even 5 minutes of your own time can really make a difference in your workday, your work week, your emotional state, you name it. So let me go over some learning objectives. What are you going to walk away with? And I'm super excited. I really packed this training. And I know we only got 90 minutes, but y'all are going to feel like you went through a whole national forest with me. At least like a hike, right? We can't see every single tree, every single leaf right now, but I'm going to show you the larger picture of trauma on this hike. So one is we're going to define trauma. We're going to learn about what are some traumatic events. We want to develop a deeper understanding of what it means to be trauma informed. So it's not just seeing the world as a chaotic, horrible, traumatic place, but what are some environments that are impacting people? How can I support someone? That doesn't mean you become a therapist. That doesn't mean you take on their emotional burdens or challenges. It means, how are you that consistent, supportive, understanding person? How does that fit within your role? What can you give? What's not in your role? So that someone has predictability, someone knows what they can expect, right, when they work with you, and you become that coach, you become that mentor. And wherever this person is in their journey, because we all know the students that we work with, the colleges that we work with, you name it, everyone is on their own life path. And we're just meeting them at one point, at one time, in one service. But you can truly make a difference. And then all assets of what's the foundation. So we're going to do a lot of foundational work today that will help us at future trainings. So what we pick up today, as I said, not a race, because we can pick up the rest up at other points, right? And very important, y'all, what are your learning objectives? So what do you hope to gain from today's training? I'm going to give you that moment to type, unmute, or write it to yourself. What do you want to gain? You're here for a reason. You showed up. I would love to know why. All right, friends, I know there has to be someone out there. Maybe we haven't had coffee yet or tea, but let's see. All right, Ryan. All right, y'all are jumping the bus. I love it. So get more information, right? That seems really important. I'm a survivor of DV. Thank you so much for sharing that. We have so many students that face trauma, and I'm able to help them, more understanding. Largely point 3, so that foundation, we're really looking for those skills to help others to be at peace. Nicole, just want to say, to be at peace and to have your own healing work is one of the biggest foundations with trauma. and helping others with their own trauma recovery. You having your own peace, we don't get trained on that in our jobs, right? It's not really discussed all the time, but it's a crucial element. We want to support students more, help them navigate, create safe spaces for traumatized students. So I think we're all in the same boat here, right? We want to refresh knowledge, beautiful. We have here, like to understand, support students, teenagers specifically, and being able to apply this with their own family. So I would say, everyone, the skills, the conversation we have today with trauma, it is honestly some life skills for yourself, for your own experiences, but also individuals who you definitely work with. But just know that this is holistic, meaningful, a lifetime of work sometimes for some of us. So beautiful. Thank you so much, everyone, for really diving in and really sharing these highlights. Make sure you ask questions during this training. Get what you need. You can also message me directly. So in the chat, instead of responding to everyone, click my name, Jocelyn Vega /Ikoi, and I can read a message, a question, and you will have that privacy, right? To share or say what you would like to the larger group without having your name, because I know sometimes people like that, and I want to support you. So thank you, everyone, for diving right in. And I want to do a check-in poll. So my niece, she's 12. I always ask this. Apparently the kids in middle school say, what's your Wi-Fi speed? They don't really say good morning or what you're doing. I think it's a little silly. So I just wanted to share that with you. So are you at a 5G? Just put in the chat A, B, C, D. You don't have to type out the whole words, but are you at 5G? Are you A? Are you at a B? Are you medium speed, right? You're kind of going at your own rate, low speed. You just got a lot of tabs open. You got all these tabs open, right? There's a lot going on in your desktop. That's what I mean by low speed. You're carrying a lot, people. D, you're trying to reconnect, right? You're just like, it's Wednesday. How is it December? How did we get here? What happened to 2022? What is 2023? I was feeling that this morning. So don't worry if you're in the D crowd. I'm with you. And if it's not listed, you're like, Johnson, this doesn't explain me at all. Just, like our friend Darlene said, A or B, not sure. You can drop that too. So wonderful. Again, this is another, it seems silly, but it is us being intentional with caring for ourselves, checking in with ourselves, taking our own temperature before we pick up new information and take on this new learning that we're going to do today. So shout out to everyone who jumped on, who shared how they're feeling. We got a lot of 5Gs, everyone. So now I want to dive into this trauma work, right? What does it mean? What is it? It's pretty infinite. I'll just say that up front. It is infinite understanding, and it is truly unique to each and every one of us. My experience with trauma will be completely different from yours. And that doesn't make mine or yours less valid. It just makes it our own. And it's what makes us human. It's scary. There's not always clear answers. But when we have foundations of what is trauma, how can it impact us? It can really ground us as service providers to be those coaches who are understanding, who will believe people, who will remind you of your potentials that sometimes you can't see with everything going on. And also, we think about all the environments that we work in, all the people we have crossed paths with. There's been some challenges. There's been some uncertainties. There's been worry. There's been worry about, is this person going to make it? Are they going to be all right? Am I doing enough? That's trauma we experience within these jobs too. So this trauma conversation isn't just about people who are traumatized. It's something that is in our environments, and that we need to be very kind and respectful with ourselves and with others. Two-way street, people. So much love and appreciation for checking in, playing the Wi-Fi speed, telling me about your learning objectives. We are truly carrying so much power into the rest of today's training. I am pumped, y'all. I'm really excited. So let's bring it in, right? We all work in different places. We're all connected to this work. So I have another poll, again, A, B, or C. And is, what do you witness as trauma within your role? I'm not asking for specifics here. It's just, what are overall trends you notice? Is it physical, right? Maybe you have certain reactions, right? Person walks out of the room, people don't answer your calls, you name it. Is it emotions, right? Is it emotions, anger, sadness, right? Despair. Someone mentioned COVID in the chat, right? Of how COVID caused a lot of emotions during our time. And COVID for many of us was a mental health pandemic. Behaviors, maybe you're noticing some students, participants are avoidance, right? They're dodging you. It seems like they don't want to be here, but yet they come to you with emergencies, right? And it's like, well, we got to work together. We want to make this work. I hear you. I've been in those shoes too. Is it relationships? Do we notice a lot of students or participants are struggling in their own lives with their relationship with themselves, self-esteem that goes into self-perception, negative self-talk? So I'm going to open up the chat. If anyone wants to share an example that stood out to them, let's be confidential, right? Let's not say names. Let's not be too specific with a person. But if you want to share by unmuting, what's something you witnessed that's kind of stayed with you and maybe motivated you to join today? So giving a moment if anyone wants to unmute, but no pressure. There's more times to share later. Meanwhile, we can look at the chat. Not seeing anyone unmute. Don't want to pressure anyone, but we got friends who are saying all of the above. You see all of this, maybe even at the same meeting, right? You are tracking, understanding all of it. We have here, hard one to choose, probably emotions. Someone highlighted online learning, isolation, negative self-talk. And it seems like, again, we're across the board, right? Everyone's like, I've seen it all. Someone made a really great point of, it's so vast, I can hardly give voice to it. This is us as service providers, the inability for students or participants to do group work, financial difficulties. I am so glad someone brought this up. Thank you so much. Financial difficulties have caused long-term stress and fear of homelessness. And everyone, this is a great example. Shout out to them for bringing this up. But with financial difficulties, it brings up a certain type of trauma, and it is called anticipatory grief. Again, that it is anticipatory grief. And anticipatory grief is when we've all done this in our heads. You think of the worst case scenario. You think of how is this going to go completely wrong? How is this going to end up destroying me? You can feel like being homeless or losing your job or not having certain income or you name it, right? Even if nothing has taken place, it is all in your head, which is not to minimize the reality of what could happen, right? But it shows us the power of trauma, of grief, of our environment causing anxiety, stress, you name it. So shout out to financial difficulties. I'm sure some of us have experienced this in our own lives, our own childhood, and we know how finances can be traumatic. Even if it's not something physically happening to our body, it's there. So shout out to everyone who is dropping in, right? Multiple loved ones being lost, mental health concerns, seeing two generations in the classroom. So I think if you don't mind, Betsy, in the chat, what do you mean by two generations? Like you see the parent and then the child, or generations of the family, or multiple generations at once?
Yeah, I should clarify. So
Can we hear Betsy? I'm so sorry.
I am not able to hear Betsy, so there might be an issue with her audio.
Yeah, Betsy, if you can please chat us. I'm so sorry, but we definitely want to hear from you.
sorry.
Oh, there
It
we hear
didn't
you.
work. Okay,
No,
I
now
don't know
you're
what
on.
that was. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I have students who in my classroom who have dealt with and are dealing with their own traumas, and now their children are really struggling and displaying, alarming behaviors, self-harm.
Thank you for that, Betsy. And I really
Yes.
appreciate the follow-up.
Sorry about that.
No, don't be sorry. This is great. And we all appreciated hearing your voice. Trust me. We have a future training called Culture and Trauma, and that will be a great time where we will dedicate to intergenerational trauma. So Betsy, you're such a leader, thinking ahead. You're already in the next training. So I'm excited that you brought that up, and to thank everyone for your time. So let's bring it back together, right? We went in so many directions. We have so many examples, people, of trauma, and we're barely starting this training. It really shows you that trauma is already part of our work. And by being trauma informed, it's grounding ourselves in that work. Taking a step back, taking in our environment, looking at what we need. What are we giving? And are we giving that back to ourselves so that we can continue to be present when we are exposed to trauma from stories, from the participants, from the realities, right? I think it was Betsy again who said, anticipatory grief hasn't happened yet, but it's based on past real events. You get to be that bridge. You get to be that mentor. You get to be that coach. You can't solve everything, people. You know, you got to be realistic, right? And what your role is, what you can do. But you are often a bridge for many experiencing trauma, whether they tell you or not. You got to believe in the impact of your role and who you are and what you do. And if you don't remind yourself, you email me and we can talk it out, because I'm sure you have an impact. So what is trauma? Very quickly, just want to say there are multiple definitions, and each of us in this room would define it differently. But we want to have a framework, right? We want to refer back to a similar concept. So this is what we propose here at ICOI. It's also by SAMHSA, the Federal Administration on Mental Health and Substance Use in the United States. And it is defining trauma by 3 E's: an event, an experience, or effects. And want to be super clear, everyone, that it's not a 1, 2, 3. It's not like, oh, there's an event, you have this experience, and then you're navigating these effects. Sometimes as individuals, we are seeing the effects. We're seeing our behaviors. We're seeing our frustrations. We feel like a huge cloud is over us, right? We feel the weight of the world and don't even know where it's coming from. And then it depends in our own lives or what's going on. We're able to take some steps back. Maybe we have support. Maybe we've been stabilized in our own lives, and then we can open up some doors that have been shut within our heart, within our mind, within our body. Like, I had this experience. I wasn't believed. I was told to shut up. I was told that that's not important. I didn't even believe myself in what happened, right? And then sometimes you are learning about your experience, and then you're not able to trace what was the actual event. What was that exact thing that happened? Because sometimes, as you see in the definition, it is a series of events: chronic stress, ongoing stress, unfortunately, long-term trauma like COVID has been for many of us. Trauma as an event can also be a set of circumstances like poverty, right? Discrimination, homelessness. Your set of conditions, your set of circumstances can really make you vulnerable to trauma, the experiences, and the effects. This doesn't make someone weak. This doesn't make someone less strong. This doesn't make you unworthy. It is taking an environmental approach to trauma of what is happening around this person. What is their world? What is their life like? And not just thinking, what's wrong with them? Why are they acting like that? Why can't they keep up? Do they not care? And people, I want to say, as a service provider, myself, sometimes we have moments with clients or participants and we're like, oh, you're going to lose it, or you're not keeping up. And for us, the most important thing that we can do is to take a trauma-informed approach, be compassionate, empathetic, right? Advocate for this individual and give them voice and choice, which we'll highlight later on. So this is a definition of trauma, right? Just a foundation. And we're going to continue on, because as service providers, you're like, Jocelyn, what do I actually do? Give me some instructions. I hear it. I love it. So there are 4 R's, the 4 R's of being trauma informed. And one is realizing that there is trauma. You're like, Jocelyn, this is too simple. Let's skip it. But really paying attention of how does it show up where you work, the services that you provide, right? Your context, your community, the zip codes that students are coming from, right? Their backgrounds, their histories. What's the classroom like nowadays? COVID can, realizing what COVID was and online learning, like, I think it was, I forgot who said it, but someone said it in the chat. And then the next step is recognizing within your role. So whatever your job title is, whatever services you provide, how do you recognize the signs and symptoms of trauma? How do you engage? How do you as a team consistently respond? This again might sound like a breeze, and something like, Jocelyn, how does this help with trauma? I'm gonna tell you, if I'm a student and I go to you and you treat me in a certain way when I make a mistake, and then I go to someone else and they treat me differently, same mistake. I go to someone else, I call, they treat me differently. I, as a student or as a participant, am doing the same action, but I'm treated differently by various people. It makes it inconsistent. It can make it not very safe. It can break down my trust, right? Of this person treats me this way, this person treats me like that. And it's as simple as, how do you correct behavior? How do you let people know there's a mistake? How do you have a similar approach as a team? Of someone is late to appointment, what's the general understanding of what we do, people? We ask, are you okay? What's going on? How can I help? Right? All right, you're late for this appointment. Here are some consequences, right? We won't say it like that, but you just recognizing trauma, recognizing how do you respond as a team, which is the third R, it really creates a sense of safety. It really helps us as a field resist re-traumatizing people. I feel like sometimes I talk about trauma and being trauma informed, and it's like, Jocelyn, we're making things too easy for people. That's definitely an opinion I want to respect, but we also want to understand that we're here to help people. We are in human services, and as humans, we got a lot going on. The last thing as a human, as someone suffering, doing their best, navigating the world, is to feel less than, to feel dismissed, to feel unworthy, especially because I'm going to you for help. There is long-term building and long-term perspective that we need to have with being trauma informed. And we'll go more into it. This is just big picture, overall steps we need to take. And even if you're at step one, right, of I'm just realizing trauma and it's going to take me some months, but I'm always going to realize and I'm going to do it consistently. I'd rather you be there than, again, be at this imaginary race of trying to do everything, take everything on when you don't get your foundational step of realizing trauma within your own services. Right? It's very powerful. And yes, Teresa, we're going to talk about individual perception of trauma in a lot of different ways. So I'm heading your direction. Thank you so much for that. And keep these questions coming, y'all. I created this worksheet for everyone just to have, it's there for you. And you can change this. You can create your own Word document. But how do you realize trauma within your work? Our work can cause trauma, people. I don't want to say that for you, but all the jobs I had, there was trauma that was triggered in our services, in the systems that we were a part of, whether it's deadlines, whether it's certain expectations people can't meet, whether it's as staff, us experiencing trauma. So I want you at another time to think about, what are those events? What are those experiences? And what are some effects, right? And do this without judgment, do this without blame, do this with an open curiosity to just lay it out, to put it there, to give it a home. Because people, sometimes we feel like, I don't want to bring up what's not working. I don't want to bring up what feels yucky, right? To use that silly word, the things that don't feel great about my work. But if we don't identify for ourselves what's depleting us, what's nourishing us, what's actually happening, we are carrying and juggling a lot within ourselves as service providers, and it makes it difficult to be fully present for those individuals who do come to us. And also you deserve as a service provider to have this clarity, this space for yourself, because if not, all this trauma, these events, these experiences, these effects, you're carrying them as memories. You're maybe debating some things internally with yourself. You might have some negative dialogue to yourself, like, I'm not doing enough. This work is, not doing what it needs to do. The world is a terrible place, so on and so forth. You are carrying all that inside, and you don't deserve that. So by engaging with external reflection, external documentation, you get to validate yourself. You get to see how much you're dealing with, how much you're doing. And don't do this by yourself, right? You work with teams, you have supervisors, you do this work together, people. And we have here Karen, participation challenges. So this can be, I know a lot of us here work in college settings, and I used to work at one point with college students. And one of the things I noticed with participation challenges were students not making it to meetings, students not making certain deliverables that they had to have for the program, right? And if you don't complete these expectations, we might not keep you for this program due to our own funding. So that's what I mean by participation challenges is, what are the barriers that students face, participants face in staying within your program? What are the type of events? What are the type of experiences, and what are the effects you see? And for everyone here, you're just like, okay, Jocelyn, besides feeling better about myself, how does this help me? This can help you onboard team members. This can help you, as a team say, hey, November, holiday blues. That's a thing, people. Holiday blues, finals, midterms, you name it. There's a lot going on in the air. Let's come together as a team and talk about it together. Let's collectively debrief, because we need to have each other's back, and no one should be carrying these burdens by themselves, right? But again, doing it in a sense of how are we serving, how are we realizing, how are we doing trauma work, instead of we're going to complain about people. Like, this is not a complaining session. It's okay to vent. It's okay if you need that. However, it's to do the work and to help humanity, right? So that's what I mean. I hope that helps, Karen. And I'm going to play a video of childhood trauma, because I know most of us work with adults, teenagers, even individuals later in life, but trauma for many of us happened in our childhood. At one point or the other, maybe we witnessed trauma to someone else, but by taking this holistic approach, right, of trauma, of how does it start? How does it get rooted? And all of us also experience childhood. Like everyone in this room experienced being a child, being a middle schooler, being 6, 10, a toddler, a baby. Like we all went through that. And I'm sure we were all very adorable. Like it is a shared human experience of childhood, okay? So the reason why I'm gonna play this video, it's gonna give us some brain science. It's gonna tell us how experiences like adverse childhood experiences, that second E of trauma, can really shape a lot of parts of our life. And it doesn't mean we're doomed, doesn't mean we're broken, doesn't mean something's wrong with us. It just shows us the impact that trauma can have and our responsibility to honor and help trauma recover. So I'm excited to play this video. And yeah, I'll just play it now. So thank you.
Brain development is much more than a story about biology. From the earliest years, relationships with others play a key role in shaping how our brain grows and develops. Early relationships, where there is abuse and neglect, have a long-term impact on children. A brain that has adapted to survive in a threatening or unpredictable world may not work so well in an ordinary environment. This can create what is called latent vulnerability, where early abusive or neglectful experiences with carers put children at greater risk of experiencing mental health problems in the future. For these children, compared to their peers, common experiences like moving to a new school can feel more daunting and stressful. New faces can appear threatening, while positive social cues can be missed. It can be harder to negotiate new social situations and learn to trust new people. Even fun experiences like joining a new sports team can be challenging. Too much focus on potential threat cues can mean missing out on positive social cues, such as a playful nudge. Or it causes an overreaction, which leads to an increased risk of conflict and sometimes violence. These reactions can increase the likelihood of generating new stressful events. It's harder to deal with everyday challenges when you feel unconfident and anxious inside, and harder to build and maintain relationships. Over time, this can mean a child loses friends and the support of adults, and so misses out on opportunities to grow and develop. This social thinning can increase the risk of mental health problems in the future. Neuroscience research is beginning to shed new light on how vulnerability unfolds over a child's life. All children need care and stimulation from adults who value them and who show them attention and love. These experiences shape a child's brain development. When children face traumatic experiences like abuse and neglect, their brain adapts to help them cope. We know of changes in 3 different brain systems: the reward, memory, and threat systems. Experiences of domestic violence or physical abuse can lead to hypervigilance, where the brain reacts more to threats. This might help a child stay safe in an early adverse environment, but it can cause problems in more ordinary environments. Hypervigilance can best be understood as a pattern of adaptation rather than a sign of damage. Abuse and neglect can also mean a world where a child's basic needs for care and attention are not met. This can shape the brain's reward system, the part of the brain that helps us learn about positive aspects of our environment and motivates our behavior. Over time, the brain's reward system can learn to respond differently to things like positive social cues. Neuroscience studies have also pointed to changes in the autobiographical memory system, our memory of everyday past experiences. Following trauma, negative memories appear to become more salient, which means they become more prominent than positive ones, and everyday memories can also become less detailed. This is a problem because we need to draw on past experiences to help us deal with new social situations. Neuroscience research is showing how childhood trauma can create latent vulnerability, increasing the risk of later mental health problems like anxiety and depression. This vulnerability is not just located in the child, but arises through their relationships. Helping children who have experienced trauma still requires ordinary boundaries and consequences, but it also requires us to step back and reflect and see behavior that we find challenging in a different light. A child may simply be doing their best to survive now, with brain adaptations from the past. We know a child's brain has the capacity to continue to adapt. For this to happen, they need our help to build and maintain trusted relationships, manage everyday stresses, and prevent new ones from happening. We need to encourage them to try again and believe things can be different. This is far from an easy task and takes time. Science is helping reframe our understanding of childhood trauma. Seeing children's behavior in a new light can mean we respond differently, but there is much still to learn. Working together, we can develop more effective approaches that promote resilience and recovery. We can help children build trusting relationships and create opportunities for their brains to adapt in new ways.
Thank you so much, everyone. I'll be sending a follow-up resource. It's kind of a PDF with that video broken down in information if you want to read more. But again, thank you so much for engaging. I know we're all in our own rooms in different places, but felt like we were zoned in. So giving a moment, if anyone wants to unmute to share quickly any takeaways, anything that stood out to you. There's always a chat, but giving that mic if anyone wants to go for it. Don't be shy, everyone. We're all here for each other. So low stakes. All right, you got a friend who's raising their hand. Nicole, go for it.
Yes, hopefully you can hear me okay. But one thing that stood out to me that I hadn't really thought much about was the idea of social thinning. It seems like a coping mechanism to safeguard someone's self from really engaging in other people because they're afraid of further harm. And I never even knew that existed. So I'll take that away from this session.
Thank you so much, Nicole. That really means a lot. I'm so glad that was helpful. And one more friend, we have one more person who would like to unmute. I did see some mics turned on, so just giving you that moment. Beautiful. All right. Well, we have someone here who dropped in the chat, the imagery of the student being pushed underwater, blended with his intrusive memory of childhood abuse is very powerful. Absolutely. There is this quote that would always say out to me, you're going to meet this doctor later. His name is Gabor Mate. And it is, trauma is not just what happens to you, it's what happens inside of you. So there's so much that we will not know of someone's trauma history, their full story, right? When I even worked with survivors of domestic violence, I was sometimes the first person who heard what was going on. I was sometimes the first person to witness this person talking out loud about what was going on. And I also worked with individuals who, didn't share everything. And they didn't need to, because I believed them and was going to support and advocate for them as if I knew everything going on. Because if someone's showing up to my office, someone's showing up for next steps, you're going to get my full attention. You're going to get my dedication for what I can do within my role, and tag in team members if it's beyond my own needs. And to do that consistently with pride and predictability for this client can really help individuals, their trauma stories that you might not fully know. We don't know our coworkers' trauma stories fully, but yet we work with them all the time, right? Even our friends, people who we know, we don't know what's truly going on in everyone's life. So it's very important for us to not just think about this video with just children and young adults, but even ourselves when we're in survivor mode, when our vulnerability has been shaken, right? When we feel like we can't trust anyone and we have to do everything by ourselves. Social thinning, I think all of us experienced that to some extent in our own lives during COVID. And then what is our own reward and memory and threat systems, right? When you feel threatened, how do you recognize that? How do you support yourself? What do you need? And not waiting for the crisis or for things to hit the wall. But when you feel safe, when you feel willing, whatever small step of recognizing your human needs and honoring yourself as a human, right? This is, again, some life skills all of us can take away at our own pace. I'm not saying like open the trauma door fully, take your time, and we're all here for each other. So thank you so much, Nicole, and everyone. So quick poll, we're gonna finish this section. We're gonna transition to another section soon. So this is just an activity to close out what we learned. And it's okay, it's really quick. A, B, or C, did you learn something new? It's okay if you put no. Maybe you say, I didn't learn something new, but I'm interested in this, right? I'm interested in this. B, you're still processing and it's not listed, drop in the chat. So just checking in with my friends, we're virtual. We gotta make community happen, right? So we got a lot of B's, beautiful, some friends who are processing. So thank you so much for, again, checking in and checking out of this section. So nice. Now we're going to go into, I forgot who asked, but what is the individual perception of trauma? And everyone, there is hope at the end of the tunnel. Trust me, with the section, we're going to take away some like hopeful skills as well. It's going to get a little heavy, but I promise you it is for our own benefit, our own awareness, and to be aware of how trauma is something that we can really work with when we take this nuanced individual approach. So gentle reminder, this is something I tell so many people because I've learned it the hard way. I have been through some challenges in my own life. I have lost clients working abroad. There's just certain situations that have come up. And for me, I learned that there's a quote here, but our exposure to trauma in our professions has a personal impact. It just does, right? And we must continuously, right, support our own healing to nourish our own professional impact. And, I'm not saying this because it sounds nice. I'm saying this because I have hit those walls. I have hit burnout. I have lost clients. My own life of trauma, because we all have some piece at one point. I grew up witnessing domestic violence. I almost lost someone who I grew up with my entire life to domestic violence while I was working in domestic violence, you name it, right? And I had to make a choice. Do I continue to sacrifice myself and essentially give up on myself in service to others? Or do I serve myself so that my service is consistent to everyone who I cross paths with, so that I can be who I want to be and let that be an example for others, right? Like people, you cannot let yourself wash away within this trauma work, because trauma is like, there's this other quote of trauma, working in trauma is like expecting to walk in water and not get wet, right? And you are strong, you are capable, you are amazing people, but you also got to take care of yourself. So some gentle reminders for you. And this, again, are some life skills we all deserve. So what are some trauma responses? Because again, we've talked about what is trauma. We watched that video. And for us, trauma can look like a response. That's what's going on the outside. But as we learned in the video, there's a lot going on internally. There's a lot going on in this body, this mind that we don't see. But as providers on the outside, we see this response. You might see a participant who is very controlling. You might see a participant who only comes to you with the emergencies, and then it's radio silence, right? You might have a participant or yourself or coworkers or whoever feeling guarded all the time. And you're not sure how to give feedback, right? Maybe there's negative self-views or worldviews, I should say, of, is this program going to work? Is this test helping me graduate actually going to do something when I don't have a home, when I'm dealing with all this other stuff? And it's like, both things can be true, but I want to prioritize you. I want to center you. I want to hear you, because I'm sure we've all had those moments with a friend, with a family member, with a participant, with our own selves of, sometimes we need to be heard. Sometimes we need to talk out. Sometimes we need to know that this person who I'm going to isn't going to punish me, and maybe just see how hard I'm trying, because I am, even if I'm not completing all of these checklists, right? So very important for us to remember that trauma is definitely a response, but there's also a lot going on inside, which we'll cover next. Quick tip for all of my providers who work with people or just live life, thinking about when you feel safe, when you feel like you got that emotional capacity, when you're especially in a good mood, right? You want to have that good energy going into it. But what are your trauma responses, right? With work, we can just focus on work. You know, let's say a participant doesn't answer your phone calls, you're falling behind, right? Work is piling up. What's your response, right? Do you start negative talking yourself? Do you start blaming people? And like, this is, again, without judgment and shame, because we want to respect ourselves, what we're going through, what our body's asking. So it's not to be mean to yourself. It's just to understand, what do you do when you're responding to trauma or experiencing trauma on the job? So remember that chart, that 4 R's, that's a great place to explore that when, again, you feel safe, comfortable, you're especially in a good mood, you got that emotional capacity. Because if we don't see our own behaviors, if we don't see our own responses, it's kind of hard to coach a student, a participant with their own, right? It's like, you got to walk the talk for someone to go on that walk with you. So again, you don't have to do it, just an option, but truly helped me out in various points in my professional career. And it's also based in research. So now we're going to go into the effects of trauma. And I want you in this moment to pick one of these thoughts. So think about trauma as development, self-concept, biology, just pick one, and then write an example that stands out to you. So emotions, I think all of us can think of one pretty quickly, but thinking of effect of trauma you have seen, whether relationships, behavior. You already did this earlier, so quickly just jot it down. Doesn't have to be too long. This is just in your notebook. And we're going to cover all of this in the upcoming slides. So I'm giving you that moment to reflect, to write down. Don't overdo it. Don't overthink it. Because unfortunately, right, and I don't mean that with a negative context, it's just like the reality of it is that trauma can affect us in all these ways. And trauma does not ask you permission to say, I'm going to impact you in all these ways. I'm going to affect you in all these ways. Hey, I'm going to give you a warning that long term, I'm going to affect you in this way, right? It's a process, a situation where we don't have control over. So with that, we're going to dive in to give those specific individual perceptions. So you wrote down that one example for one area. If you're still thinking about it, don't overthink it. It's truly okay. And thank you for everyone who paused with me. So let's talk about trauma in the human body, right? Let's see. So here we have a few examples, and we have here, and I see this text by Teresa. I'll respond in a moment. But there's this one quote: if there's one thing you remember about trauma in the human body, is that your body will continue to defend itself against a threat that belongs in the past. So you might notice students might not feel comfortable walking into certain spaces. You might notice students who, physically are hypervigilant around their environments, right? Or you notice their voice is lower than other students, you name it. It's not to compare students, it's just observing, right? And we have here that the body and trauma can have a huge impact, because our thoughts, everyone, what you're thinking, what you're imagining, can impact your body immediately. Like, I'm talking about seconds. So that thought you have sends signals from your brain to your nervous system, to your blood system, to the various systems in your body to let it know we're under threat. Let's start pumping out some hormones. Let's get ready with some cortisol. Or, you know what, we're excited about this. Let's pump some dopamine, right? Let's get some serotonin up in here. And that happens in a course of seconds, and you're not pulling those switches. Just single thoughts can change your whole state of your body, right? You go to the doctor's office, you were running to get there, you're hurried, you're chasing the bus, you're trying to park. They take your blood pressure, y'all. I'm telling you, it's going to be pretty high, right? Because you're in this state of urgency, and that is literally just through your own mind and your physical behaviors, right? And Ryan, thank you so much. The body keeps a score. And we have here someone who mentioned the body keeps a score. Can you share more if you don't mind unmuting? But no pressure if you don't want to share. Okay. I'm gonna let them slide. And then we have Ryan who's saying the body speaks loudly. So yes, our body, with all of these things that can make us feel wrong, make us feel biologically drained, right? Sometimes we can get annoyed with our body, y'all. Who raise your hand in your head, or not, you don't have to. Raise your hand if you've ever been mean to your body. Why do my knees hurt? Oh, like this isn't working. Or, I feel like a lot of us can be really mean of, why can't I do this the same? Why am I so tired? And it's like, your body is communicating with you that it needs to slow down, that it needs help. It is doing its best to help you. And you're not responding. You're not in alignment with it. And the body will say no at one point. So I'm not sure if you've ever been working so hard, working late hours, and then you get sick. And then boom, you're collapsed, you're just like asleep. That is your body doing everything it can to slow you down, because you're not doing it. And if your body is here for you, your body will only know this life, people, right? You're only going to live in your body. You can go all over the world. You only got this body. It is here to serve you. And when we think about diseases, when we think about needs that our body has, it is communication of our body begging us for something different, for rest, for change, you name it. So what is that internal relationship we have with our own body, with what it needs? Trauma can impact it as well, but it's not to say, again, we're doomed. It is, use your body as an incredible tool to work through, to process, to recognize, to even thank your body, of, thank you for helping me be alive. Thank you for all the hours you put in this week. Thank you for helping me in that situation where I felt so helpless, right? Like this is a time where you have to be compassionate with your body, because it's constantly listening to you, right? You are its biggest living image. So I just want to give that love to the body. And your physical health can also impact other elements of your health, whether it's emotional, behavioral, you name it. It's all one big system, everyone. Your mind is only one system of everything else you got going on. So here in the next one, it's a visual from my visual people of how the body is a system. So your thoughts, I don't know if y'all knew this, but we at least go through 3,000 thoughts per hour. How? Where are my sticky notes? Like how is that actually happening in here? It is. That's like bare minimum 3,000. Some people have more, especially students, I'm sure, right? Emotional volatility, right? Feelings, which is the next slide. How do you feel in the inside can shape what happens to us on the outside. So nervousness, maybe your hands are jittering, right? Maybe you can't sit still. Maybe you can't sleep. Maybe you have all these running thoughts. Your body and mind need some reconnection. Whether it's taking some breaths, standing outside, watering your plant, taking a nice cup of tea. How are you mentally engaging with yourself physically? And I'm not talking about doing a marathon, people. I'm talking about intentional time you take to honor your body and your time. And that is trauma all of us have of being disconnected from our own bodies. But there's hope, there's choices, and it's really your decision of how you want to honor your body as a system, right? We have our physiology, so how our mind and body are not separated and it's one thing, and that can impact how our body behaves. So those chronic diseases that we talked about, our appetites, everything. It's one powerful system that is not doomed, people. You can connect however you want. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an activity, getting a new hobby, meeting up with a friend to help this incredible system that's behind your name, right? Literally, you have systems behind your name and it's your body. So trauma and emotion, right? Trauma and emotion. We got 30 minutes left in this training, just giving everyone a heads up of kind of where we're at with time. So if you have any questions, things you want me to answer, let me know. Teresa, I do see your question. I will loop that in soon. And we have trauma and emotion. So here are some examples. It can elicit intense feelings. We've talked about that. And I also want to highlight, for many of us, if we experience trauma, not just as kids, but as people, we experience this, but if we don't have the language, if we don't have someone we can go to, if we don't have the space to debrief and kind of process what actually happened, and you're just boom, 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 go, 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 move on. And that's something we do. Sometimes we disassociate, we distance ourselves, we shut it down and we put it very far. And we're not dealing with that. That's okay, right? We're trying our best, we're trying to survive. But when we don't have the language, when we don't have these things, it impacts our ability to self-regulate, to recognize our triggers, to recognize our behaviors, to recognize what our body and mind, our souls are deeply asking for, right? Things like emotions, which, they're not even physically real, but have these huge physical effects. And again, impacts kids, but also us as adults. When we don't have the language, information, education, right? Supportive adults, you name it, makes it difficult to verbally express or even communicate. Verbalize is a word, right? If you can't verbalize and you can't communicate and you don't have that internal dialogue, how am I supposed to ask for help? How am I supposed to know that this is a barrier? We're truly dealing sometimes with so many of our own shadows. So for all my friends who are like, Jocelyn, great, I'm a little overwhelmed. Help me out. I got you. Absolutely. We got a visual here on how do we even identify our own emotions? I feel like in the United States, I was born here, grew up here, but I feel like we got 4 words here. It's I'm good, I'm okay, sure. Like you don't even answer the question of how you're doing. You're just like, sure, yeah, I'm fine. And that's pretty much it, right? But let's explore that more for ourselves. There's called emotion wheels, and this will be another resource I send with like worksheets. It's really fun, really colorful too. But it's like, let's break it down, right? What are emotions? And not just standalone things, but in combination with other emotions. And how can that help us? I'll send this, and I recommend if you work with students, participants, you have an office, print this out and have it there. And you're going to notice your participants might say some new words or, look at it when there's something going on, because I saw that with clients from all different backgrounds, a lot of different roles. And it kind of validates people that you are feeling a lot of things and all at once, and it's not very clear. So let's decide what we do right here, right? Let's decide some next steps. Let's break it down. This is emotionally overwhelming. This is new information. I'm going to validate you. But let's bring it back to, what do you need right now? How are you feeling? What can I do? I believe you. I trust you, right? you gotta give people that emotional safety within this work. It's not saying you're responsible for people's emotions, right? Like we can't be responsible for someone's happiness, but we can be responsible of how we show up and what we're able to offer. So let me know if there's any questions in the chat. Here is also a funny slide of processing our emotions. People can feel awful. And here's just like a silly comic of trying to be better is actually making me feel worse, right? Anyone gone to that workout class? You're a friend trying to do a plank or something. You're just like, this is not working out, you know, or someone sends you a resource, you want to check it out, you want to listen to the podcast, and you're like, you know what, I'm triggered. I do not have the possibility for this right now. And that's okay. Like, it is totally okay, everyone, to understand that healing and trying to heal and doing trauma recovery work does not feel great all the time. I want to acknowledge and tell you with, again, love, confidence, and reassuring that healing can feel like its own crisis. You're like, oh my gosh, should I really experience that? Oh my gosh, am I really unpacking this? Am I opening this door that's been shut? And maybe you make the decision with that emotion, say, now is not the time. Now is not the time. I'm going to take a pause. I'm going to work on another area. I'm going to build up my own mental strength, emotional strength to come back. And that's totally okay. People don't say that all the time, but it is okay to decide what your healing journey looks like and when you need to take a break with processing your emotions. It's okay. And I want to validate that for everyone. Okay, so we have here with trauma and behavior, and this is focused more on the young people. But again, we all experience childhood. We all experience some type of caregiving, and our behaviors, this is not to be discouraging of anyone, but a lot of our behaviors are formed in our early life. So how you speak, how you communicate, your relationships, takes root when you're a baby, takes root when you're an infant, when you're a toddler, even middle school, you name it, right? They're called formative years for a reason. So when we're exposed to trauma, even if it's not our own, maybe it's just mom and dad or our sibling, and we're over here with our very happy life. Maybe you had that. We are still exposed to other people's trauma, okay? Maybe your home didn't experience anything, but what about your friend? What about something at school? Kids now with social media, I feel like they're exposed to trauma and stuff all the time beyond their years, way beyond their years, right? It's like unfiltered, nonstop. It just keeps going. So when we think about, again, behaviors, formative years, as a young person, even us as adults, it can be difficult to know and to describe our feelings like we talked about. And when we're experiencing trauma or traumatized, we might display behaviors that we don't even recognize we're displaying. And sometimes it can be our tone of voice. It can be us engaging in self-destructive behaviors. If you're interested, we're going to have a vicarious trauma training in future. And it talks about coping and how sometimes how we cope is, again, an adaptation to trauma. We're adapting to a trauma, but long-term, this adaptation is not helping us. It's actually hurting us and might cause more trauma or is hiding trauma. So self-destructive behaviors happen, right? We're trying to do our best. And again, this is talking about children, but this stays with us till adulthood. There is over-controlled behaviors and then under-controlled behaviors. So we all know what the over one, person yelling, upset, shutting down, you see it, right? It's like outbursts. But under controlled behavior, people, is, I would say, invisible trauma that sometimes gets encouraged or even celebrated within our society of like, you're so resilient, you just keep going, you don't stop, you just take everything on. But when we think about trauma responses, there is a trauma response called fawn, and it is when you're a people pleaser, right? And it's a trauma response because as kids, we learn, if I'm able to keep mom and dad happy, if I'm able to make my friends happy and accept me and love me, maybe that's going to shut down the trauma happening in my life. If I try to serve and make everything happen for everyone, maybe things are going to get better, right? And in our culture in the United States, that sometimes gets celebrated of like, look at this person, look at everything they're doing. But deep inside, you as a person might be losing your identity, might be burning yourself out, might be really dependent on how others feel for your own validation. And there's nothing wrong with anything of trauma or behavior. It's just understanding yourself. What do you need? And is this helping you long term, right? What supports would be helpful with this behavior? And if you notice a trauma behavior with a client, right, I think the best thing you can do is to be curious, to be open, to observe. You don't want to tell someone, hey, that's some trauma behavior. You don't want to label someone like that. You want to keep the conversation open and be committed long-term to it. So here, finally, we have just a quick thing with our behavior, but all of us are born fully expressed. Again, all of us were babies. Babies are going to get fed. Babies are going to get held. Babies are going to get their needs met. And that's why they cry all the time. That's all they got. But as we get older, in that toddler phase, infant phase, teenage, we learn how to suppress ourselves. And we slowly, sometimes in society, can lose our connection to ourselves with what our needs are, with expressing our needs, you name it. And this can get reinforced by parents or caregivers who are too stressed to even know what our needs are, right? Sometimes we don't want to make mom, dad, grandma, whoever feel bad about our needs. So we hide them, we suppress it, we don't bring it up, right? Again, that people pleasing. And it can get reinforced by also set of conditions like lack of resources, you name it. But whenever we talk about trauma work as providers, as human beings, we must reinforce our connection to ourselves. We must remember that we are whole. We must remember that whatever phase that we're in our healing journey, we're still ourselves. And you are your biggest healer. You are your greatest teacher within this work. So just want to give you that encouragement that no matter what behavior you're seeing or displaying, it's all transformable and you're coming from a whole place. So what can trauma look like? Just some examples here. I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide. But again, this is visible and visible. Trauma and development. So we are developing throughout our whole lives, people. Like development's not just this youth, young adult, child, infant thing. All of us are constantly developing throughout our lifetime. And when we experience trauma at any age, even us as adults, us in whatever life point you are, we can become stuck in that development stage. So we're thinking about young adulthoods here, right? Intimacy and isolation. And intimacy is not sexual intimacy. It is, what is your sense of meaning, purpose, belonging outside of yourself in relationship to others? Or are you isolated? Have you been removed? Have you lost that connection to yourself? You don't know what your next step is. You don't know if it's worth it. You don't know what's the point, right? And we can get stuck in this feedback loop, right, of that trauma, of those events, of those experiences, of those effects. And it can stop us, literally stop us from growing in the next stages of our development, of middle adulthood, you name it. And this doesn't mean we're broken, doesn't mean there's something wrong with us. It just means that developmentally, we're stuck and we need support and we need it. And there's nothing wrong with asking for help. So worldview, this is Teresa's question of how do we balance a client's perception of trauma and what we see as trauma? I think for us, it depends on what our role is. And Teresa, and for everyone, I recommend looking at those 4 R's of trauma of what do you realize and what do clients give you? What do you recognize? And then what are you able to do? So when we're working with clients, it's important to think about how are you supporting this person's inner self? That self-esteem, that confidence, that telling someone a good job, recognizing the time and effort people are putting in, because a lot of us don't get that in life, really, of someone seeing how hard you're trying or how good of a job you're doing. And if you do, share it with others, share it, please, because a lot of us don't get it, right? When we think about trauma and worldview, all of us are biologically wired for protection, for connection. But when we experience trauma, it wires us to constantly look for threats, to protect ourselves, to not experience that harm. And that what can cause a lot of isolation, loss of meaning, and it can impact our worldview of others, belonging, and so on. So I want to play this video in the last moments we have, and then I want to leave it for questions. But this is to allow us to close this conversation of trauma with learning from ourselves, learning from our own trauma and how we can be our own healers in our own lives and support trauma recovery in others. So this is the doctor I was talking about. This is from a personal place where you can take away from, and then we'll have time for questions. So I'll play that now.
We don't respond to what happens. We respond to our perception of what happens. Number two, of all the possible interpretations, we choose the worst one. Now, here's the learning. First time in your life that you felt hurt and angry, that when you perceived somebody didn't care about you or didn't respect you? Or has it happened before? So whether you're going to hell or you're on the way to heaven, it all happens up here, which is such a powerful teaching, because this is what we can work on. You can see yourself as the victim of the world and trying to change the world so that they won't hurt you anymore, or you can actually empower yourself. And that's what the healing is all about. And anybody listening, I just want to know, it doesn't matter what state of mind you're in, it doesn't matter what you're experiencing, it's human, it is transmutable, it is transformable, because that true self that you got disconnected from is still available to you. A quote, which I love, it's from one of my favorite teachers, and his name is A.H. Almas. And he says, your conflicts, all the difficult things, the problematic situations in your life are not chance or haphazard. They're actually yours. They're specifically yours, designed specifically for you by a part of you that loves you more than anything else. That part of you that loves you more than anything else has created roadblocks to lead you to yourself. You're not going to go in the right direction unless there's something pricking you in the side telling you, look here, this way. That part of you loves you so much that it doesn't want you to lose the chance. It will go to extreme measures to wake you up. It will make you suffer greatly if you don't listen. What else can it do? That's its purpose. I found this to be true of physical illness and mental problems and everything. You got to see, what is the teaching here? So we can look at all these things as problems to get rid of, which is what the personality wants to do, or we can look at them as learning opportunities, which is what your true self wants to do. Now, two things. One is you talked about intention in life. So my wife and I had a holiday recently in Costa Rica. Partly it was a working holiday, but partly it was just a holiday. Traditionally, we've had terrible times during holidays, partly because of my workaholism, and once I go into a holiday, I just collapse, and now my wife is dragging a corpse around. So this time, we actually want to do a holiday with intention. This is nothing to do with psychedelics, just to do with that we set an intention. What is our intention? And if we have an intention, I've learned from a couple of very wise teachers, what structures do we want to set up to support our intention? And how are we going to handle when there's kind of disagreement or conflict? We had a beautiful holiday because it was the first intentional holiday that we've had. So that intention in life in general is absolutely essential. Like every morning, what is my actual intention? This is something I do in my groups or when I teach. I ask people to tell me some recent episode when they're upset with somebody with their lives. Something that they're open to sharing. So it doesn't have to be anything sordid or thing, but just something, whether it's your spouse, partner, the bus driver, a friend. Okay, so what happened?
There were a number of issues in my home, broken aspects of the home, things that were falling apart or needed to be fixed. Physically.
Okay, yeah.
Right. And I had hired someone to do these things while I was gone.
Okay.
And I came back and none of them were fixed.
Okay. And your emotional reaction was?
Anger.
Rage. Anger, okay. Anything else besides anger?
Frustration. I was disappointed.
Disappointed is sadness. Well, disappointed is not so much an emotion as a state of mind. I'm asking what the emotions were. What's inside disappointment? Something didn't happen. I wanted it to happen. How do I feel? Isn't there sadness there?
Yeah, sadness.
So there's anger and sadness. Those are the emotions. So I'm going to ask you a silly question. What were you sad and angry about? What does that mean that they didn't fulfill their commitments?
They didn't care about me. They didn't that they didn't respect me.
So they didn't care about you and didn't respect you. What kind of person doesn't get cared or respected?
Someone who doesn't deserve to be cared for or respected.
Exactly. Somebody unworthy, right? If there are other people here, which there usually are when I do this exercise, I would ask them, okay, we just listened to Tim tell us about this experience. Are there other reasons why this other person might not have done the work that has nothing to do with him or her not caring about him or not respecting him? So what other reasons might there be?
1,000,001.
Name one.
Yeah, he could be in the hospital.
He could be in the hospital.
His
What else?
partner carried one. Could have been in a car accident.
Exactly.
He had a flight delay and got caught on Puerto Rico during a hurricane.
Yeah, he's got ADHD.
Yeah.
He can't follow through. He's under stress and he couldn't. Okay, and any number of possibilities.
Yeah.
Now, of all the possibilities that you've just outlined, including that they don't care about you or respect you, which is the worst one? So let's notice something. I should say we, because we're all like this, we don't respond to what happens. We respond to our perception of what happens. Okay? That's what the Buddha said. It's with our minds we create the world. So that if you'd found out he had ADHD or he was stressed or, you might have been sad for him, but you would not have been angry and you would not have been sad. So first of all, we don't respond to what happens. We respond to our perception of what happens, to our interpretation of what happens. Number one. Number two, of all the possible interpretations, we choose the worst one. Thirdly, what I just said isn't true. We didn't choose it. It's not like you went through all these possibilities and you said,
it wasn't multiple choice that I chose.
You didn't do that. Your brain jumped there automatically, right? The question is why?
Yeah.
Now here's the learning. First time in your life that you felt hurt and angry that when you perceived somebody didn't care about you or didn't respect you? Or has it happened before? And most people I talk to, it goes back way back into childhood. And that's what trauma is. We don't respond to the present moment. We respond to the past. But along the lines of our discussion, it's a beautiful learning opportunity. Now you get to know. Now, what if you assumed for a moment that you're the most lovable, most worthy of care, most worthy of respect person in the history of the universe, and this guy doesn't do your home? What's your response?
Any number of the other options, which does not trigger an intense negative emotional state.
Yeah. So something in you, I would argue, still believes that you're not worthy of care and respect. And that's what gets triggered. So who's the one that doesn't care about you? And who's the one that doesn't think you're worthy of respect?
No, it'd be me.
It'd be you. So that's a learning.
No, it is.
And this is exactly what you're talking about. You're saying how these difficult things, how these problems are always teaching opportunities. And that's the beauty of healing, is that when you reframe things and you actually see the source within ourselves, all of a sudden that's liberating. Because guess what? If you're feeling that way because this guy did this or didn't do that, that makes you a victim. But if you see that you're the source, now you're powerful. So whether you're going to hell or you're on the way to heaven, it all happens up here, which is such a powerful teaching, because this is what we can work on. If we're victims of the world, Ramana Maharshi was a great Indian guru. He said something like, if your foot hurts when you walk outside, you can do two things. One is to wrap the whole world in burlap, or you can get a pair of shoes. You can see yourself as the victim of the world and trying to change the world so that they won't hurt you anymore, or you can actually empower yourself. And that's what the healing is all about. And anybody listening, I just want to know, it doesn't matter what state of mind you're in, it doesn't matter what you're experiencing. It's human, it is transmutable, it is transformable, because that true self that you got disconnected from is still available to you. So it's not a question of just talking about what happened in the past. It's a question of how do we reconnect to ourselves. And what you're describing about your own state, if I can put it in one sentence, you'd probably agree with me that you're probably much more connected to yourself than you used to be.
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
That's the
prerequisite. I mean, that's why I feel the way I described it.
Exactly. I hope people will listen to this interview in a very personal sense, and that the discussion with you will help people look at themselves in maybe a new way. So rather than self-judgment about stuff that went wrong or they did to themselves or others, they get curious. What made me do that? They get curious compassionately, because we were all born innocent and we were all born just wanting to be loving and loved. And then something happens, and then it's a hard road back. But I hope that this conversation helps people reconnect with that path, or encourage them to continue on it. And then secondly, not to see it as an individual issue. It's a social issue. We live in a society that really does disconnect people. And so it's not just an individual problem or an individual family problem. It's multi-generational. We never even talked about the multi-generational nature of trauma, what it is. We pass this on from one generation to the next, not because we intend to, but because we can't help it. So it needs to be looked at in deep over the generations and broadly as the function of a whole society. So that the Buddha said that without the many, there cannot be the one, without the one, there cannot be the many. And he talked about the interconnected core rising of phenomena. So we are social creatures, our brains are wired together. So whatever you're dealing with, you have to look at not just the individual internal environment, but also the broader social and cultural environment of which you're one particular manifestation.
Thank you so much, everyone, for watching that video, for tapping in, and for just being at today's training, right? I know this was about the impact of trauma, but I think we should rename it, especially with this video, with our conclusion of the possibilities of healing from trauma, which all of you are doing, all of you are supporting. As you know, Dr. Gayver-Mate said, trauma can be a long road to come back from, but we're on a road, along the road with so many of the students, participants that we get to connect it to, but stay connected with yourself too. And don't lose this precious time. Don't blame yourself. Don't judge yourself. You're truly doing a lot here, everyone. And I hope you join future trainings. You might see other trainers who might join me. And I want to just leave you on the powerful note of you need to empower yourself. You need to honor yourself. You need to love yourself, people, within this trauma work and with yourself. So with that, I'll turn it over to Amy for our last 5 minutes, and then I'll be sticking around for any questions. So Amy, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn, and a virtual round of applause for Jocelyn. That was fantastic. I just want to open the floor for questions. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask? You feel free to unmute yourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if anyone just wants to share open thoughts.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
While you're pausing there, I'm going to just also remind you that today is the first day of a 4-part series. We will be together on December 7th for culture and trauma. We will be together on December 14th for vicarious trauma. And then we will wrap up and kick off the new year with trauma-informed supervision. So for those of us who are in a supervisory role, this is a fantastic training to really not only reflect on your own supervision strategies, but also on supervising someone who has experienced trauma. And let's be honest, we all have survived a pandemic together. So everyone has some level of trauma that they have experienced and are addressing. With that, I'm going to just, again, take a quick pause.
We have a quick question. I think it's more for you, Amy. Will we receive a certificate for PD?
So what we are able to issue is a certificate of attendance. So if you are interested in a certificate of attendance, please email, and I'm going to put our email for our center in there, icsps@ilstu.edu, and send an email to that address, and we will send you a certificate of attendance, and then that way you can use that for your CPDU credit within your institution or within your organization.
We have another question coming in, and I'm going to start off the response and then kick it back to you, Amy. I guess we're playing a soccer over here. It's World Cup season.
It is.
Yeah, it is. I don't know who you're rooting for, but it's fun to watch. We got, will we email the material? So yes, I'm going to send the slides, link to the recordings, some additional follow-up resources. So that emotional wheel worksheet, more about trauma-informed care so that you can read at your own rate. And then I'll send another video, maybe a lecture of the doctor we just watched, Dr. Gabor Mate, who's an international scholar. You also see him at other trainings. He's amazing because he's like what is it called? A physician, just your general family doctor who really started to learn more about mental health because he started noticing things too much with what is the environment that's impacting people's health. So, and then Amy, is there anything you want to add about how we email materials?
Once we get all of that, I will send that out to everybody who was on the registration list. So anybody who registered, we'll go ahead and share that out. And then we will also post the recording and that information on our website. So when you go to professional development, you'll see those recordings there. And then probably early next week, you'll see another email in your email box from Dina or from myself or Brittany saying, hey, here's the rest of the trainings and here's the recordings and resources from our first training. So we thank Jocelyn so very much for her time today. This was absolutely fantastic. And as Brittany has just posted in the chat, recordings materials will be posted to the Learning Renewal site. If you have not been to that site, please go on there and check it out. And thank you for spending your morning with us.
Absolutely. And if you have to hop off soon, I'm just going to ask everyone, since we're not seeing questions come in, what's one word that you're walking away with today? Just drop in the chat, kind of see it as your homework assignment, your checkout sheet. But what's one word that you're leaving with today? Don't overthink it, people. It's not a test. It's really not a test. So we have intentional, we have other friends who are typing away. I'm loving this. Self-care, understanding, awareness, renewal. Oh, what a great word. Self-care again, informed, exclamation point, grace and respect. This is great. I love this. I'm so happy.
And in that vein, we will be doing an evaluation. You will get that when you also get the email with all the resources. Please take a minute. It will not take long. Please take a minute to fill that out. Dina, do you have any closing comments or anything we need to share?
No, I don't have anything else. Just thank you everyone for taking the time to be with us. And we hope that you join us for the rest of the series.
Absolutely. And keep dropping your word if you haven't already as you get ready to close out. Give you a sneak peek. The next training on culture and trauma will have a workforce development focus. And that's not just to get people jobs, but what does it mean to be in development work? And it's a very unique type of programming, right? It's its own forest. With vicarious trauma, we'll talk about trauma we experience, how to manage that trauma as service providers. And I'm going to drop in some holiday blues content. So how the holidays for, our participants, for our own selves, it's a lot of trauma to sometimes navigate. And sometimes the holidays can be really hard for us or those we know. So just giving you a sneak peek at those other trainings. And I'm still here for any questions if anything comes up, but keep dropping your word as you get ready to transition. And truly, thank you so much for a beautiful training, beautiful time. It really means a lot to connect with you. And just know that you are doing incredible work, people. I wish I can say that to you face to face, but I'm saying it with my full heart on this Zoom call.
Thank you very much, Jocelyn, and thank you all for your time today. Have a
Thank
great
you,
rest of your
everybody.
day.